Hello and welcome to Two Therapists and a Microphone. I am Dr. Harrison Davis.
And I'm Dr. Aisha Dickerson.
Two Therapists and a Microphone is a show about mental health, wellness, relationships, and social issues that personally affect you. We broadcast live every Monday evening at 7 o'clock p.m. on the Our Black Media Network.
We are two licensed psychotherapists with decades of clinical experience, and we want to hear from you. We want you to tell us about the situations and issues that you have going on in your life. So please visit our website, www.twotherapists.com, and click on Ask Two Therapists at the top of the page.
Absolutely. And don't forget to like and share our pages. You can watch us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and something else, Twitter. That's right.
Yes, Twitter.
So today, I want to talk about some alarming incidents that's been happening in some of the K through 12 schools in the Metro Atlanta area, primarily high school, about some violence that's been going on. Saw some recent incidents on news. Did you see that, Aisha, where the high school girl beat up the teacher out
No,
in Rockdale County?
so I didn't because I don't watch the news.
Good for
I
you.
don't like the news. It's just I used to watch it, and every other day there was some type of violence on there. If it's, against kids, against black people, kids
Yep.
doing something to teachers, kids doing things to each other, and it's just too much for me. I get upset, makes me want to fight people, so I just stop watching the news
Yes,
altogether.
let's not. Yeah, let's not do that.
Yeah.
So I watched the news because I've gone back to watching the news. I gave it a moratorium for about 2.5 years, but I was alarmed. I know kids get into fights. I know high schoolers get into fights, but I was alarmed by that video. The little skinny girl had to be at least ninth or 10th grade. She beat up the teacher. She beat up the teacher, and the teacher tried to close the door, slammed her to the ground, beating up on her. People were videotaping it. Some of the other teachers looked like they were afraid to do something. I've learned to understand that teachers are not obligated to intervene. I have learned that since then. But the teacher ended up with a broken leg, and she was injured throughout the fight. And what was also equally alarming was the reaction of some of the other kids. They were laughing, some of them were horrified, but they were not cheering on the student, but it looked like they were entertained
Hmm.
by what was going on. So that was equally as alarming. And then every day I'm hearing about students getting shot, not always on campus, but a 16-year-old at their home, and you go back to school and you have to notify the school community. And I'm getting this impression that, they're used to it, that violence has been normalized. And so today we have two experts to join us for the show to talk about high school students in particular, exposure to violence, and their mental health. So let me first introduce our first guest. That is Milani Smith. She holds a master's degree in mental health counseling and is pursuing her specialist in school counseling following her certification this spring. She has worked in education for 16 years and as a school counselor in Fulton County Schools for the last 6 years, currently working with off track seniors in the Tribe Academy. She utilizes a strength based approach to counseling, believing that we all possess the power to improve our lives regardless of circumstances or past trauma. Through the use of expressive therapy such as play art, music, and movement, individuals are able to improve their self concept and gain greater understanding of their trials and ways in which to overcome them. Welcome to the show, Milani.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, and our other guest is Fontella Jones. She holds a master's degree in school counseling and is a licensed professional counselor. She has worked in education for 24 years and has served as a high school counselor in Fulton County Public Schools for the last 8 years. As a licensed mental health counselor, Fontella utilizes a person centered approach to therapy, along with cognitive behavioral therapy and solution focused brief therapy, to assist individuals in identifying, challenging, and changing challenging unhealthy behavioral patterns, ultimately allowing them to live a more purposeful and fulfilling life. Welcome, Fontella and Milani. Thank you both for coming.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to call Fontella Dr. Jones because I understand that you have earned your doctorate degree, and I
Girl, you
think
better
have.
change that bio.
I told her
I told her.
did.
we did. But ladies, thank you. You guys seem highly qualified. I'm happy to hear that there are some school counselors out there who are trained also as a mental health therapist. That is wonderful. Now, I just mentioned the fight out in Rockdale County. Not quite sure you guys saw the video news or are familiar with it, but it seems like, is it me or is there an uptick in violence in the schools? Let me start with you, Milani. What did you think about the video? And my belief that there seems to be more violence today than 10, 20 years ago in the school system.
So a lot of questions there. I did see the video, and I too try not to watch the news. After the Trump administration, I actually took a moratorium also.
Yep.
But I did happen to see it just on CNN. You know, I do have certain apps. I do try to pay attention to world politics and things. But with that particular video, I'm not surprised by the reaction of the students. You mentioned the teens seem to be entertained by it, and it is a form of entertainment, to be honest. I think violence, not only just in their communities, if we're talking about urban areas, but I even think in media, in video games and things like that, it's very normalized violence. And to see it up close and personal, you would think would be a deterrent, but it's more like just entertainment. And so to answer the question, do I see a more of an uptick since I was in high school many, many years ago? Absolutely. I'm from an urban area also. I'm from New York City. And there were not many fights in high school in the school building. That wasn't a norm. Certainly back in your communities, maybe your neighborhoods, on your block, sure, there might have been some instances of that, but not in school at all. I can't even think of one fight that I ever witnessed or experienced in high school. Again, decades ago. But I think that a lot of times the students don't have the skills equipped to de-escalate things in the moment. And so their outlet is to physically fight.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of normalized in, like I said, media, music, games, that you can react that way. And I hate to pick on reality television, but you have grown women, who supposedly live in these $1 million homes that are physically fighting each other. Well, why do we think teenage girls who have less control of their emotions, who have less experience dealing with emotions, aren't going to do the same thing?
That's a great point.
Yeah. So I just think a lot of it just is really, I don't think it's twofold, actually, for me. I think that a lot of the parents aren't equipped with skills also to help their children deal with things like this, to deal with emotions, to help them navigate that. Because we have parents come up to school who want to fight. So am I right, Dr. Jones? You have parents come up who want to fight.
Yeah.
So Dr. Jones, tell us about what your thoughts about. Did you watch the video? Did you see it or you heard about it? And what are your thoughts about what I believe is an uptick in violence in schools right now?
Well, I did not watch that particular video, but there is not a shortage of videos out there demonstrating, violence in the schools between students, students fighting teachers. And to kind of piggyback on what Milani was saying, a lot of times they are just mirroring what they see at home. Like parents come up to the school violent, using profanity, wanting to fight other parents, actually wanting to fight students. I know it's unbelievable. And I've been in education for 24 years. So there's been an uptick since I started in education in 1998. Like it's horrifying to see, just how violence is normalized, and the students, they're entertained by it. Mm-hmm. They don't try to stop it. They may not necessarily encourage it, but for the most part, they just stand by and they videotape it and they airdrop it, and it's all around the school. So there's definitely an uptick in this. It's very alarming.
So I like that you brought that up, because I'm thinking about something that happened this past week, and I was at a play, and thank God it wasn't a fight, but there was a young boy. This is in middle school, and he slipped and fell and hit his knee, and he was crying, and there were high schoolers that were there, probably watching their siblings, and they were laughing. And I have to admit, my 17-year-old was one of them. I immediately snapped on her That's what are you laughing at? That boy has hurt himself. That's so stupid for y'all to sit up here and laugh.
Mhm.
Other people are just sitting there just letting their kids laugh. Like, what is
Mhm.
going on with the parents that not just
Exactly.
that they are the ones that are fighting, but they don't check their kids on what I consider inappropriate reactions to incidents like that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and then it comes down to parenting is right. That's where they're first learning things. That's what we have to combat when we're in the school environment to say, okay, in the school environment, you're not going to curse, even though I've heard you curse in front of your parent and you can curse at home. In this environment, we want you not to curse. So it's almost like a second raising that we're doing, but we're combating what's normalcy to them, you know, and that's the difficult part. So you likely have parents who think that maybe they think that's funny too, a little kid falling and hurting themselves. So you can't teach what you don't agree with and what you don't know. And for me, I always try to think of it as a sense of like our community and our parents, they just need more help and more guidance. There has been, you know, major trauma, Black community as well as just watching the violence that's taken place from just the color of our skin, as well as the pandemic. So recently, there's just been a lot of like major trauma things that I think people aren't really realizing the effect that that's having on everybody. So I think our adults are kind of stressed. You know, they're trying to survive. They're trying to do the best they can. But I think they need more skills to help them kind of reinforce the things and values we're trying to teach them. So I think it starts there at home. And then that's why we're having the challenge in school. But I agree with Fontel. I've only been in education 16 years. That sounds like a lot, but same thing.
Only 16
I know,
years.
but I've only worked in urban areas. I've only worked in Metro Atlanta and Fulton County. But even then, in one of the most impoverished zip codes that I worked in, the violence in schools is ridiculous. Like where we're at now, it's not uncommon to have 3 fights in one day. That's like a normal thing now. It really is. And you know, like I said, we work at the same school. So she can attest that we're not exaggerating. We're not out here saying, you know, trying to, well, we should be ringing an alarm, but it's honestly, it's kind of scary. And it makes a lot of, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed in the news of the number of teachers who are leaving the field of education. And that was like during COVID and then post-COVID, but it's continuing because we still haven't addressed the real issues. Like we try to go back to business as usual. You can't, a whole community is traumatized. You can't just go back to business as usual, you know?
So Fontella, I want to ask you a question. What is it that they're fighting about? I mean, so many fights. What is there to fight about at school all day, every day?
It is. And oddly enough, I was working with a young man today and I asked, like, what do they fight about? And he said, unfortunately, a lot of it is gang related.
Oh, that's still a thing. Like, I mean, in my mind, that's like played out.
Thinking the same thing.
That's a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Gang. A lot of it is gang related.
Yes.
The same ones from back in our day?
No.
Same colors? Okay.
No. There's different, there's newer. So the age of blood and Crips,
gangs.
There aren't blood and Crips. There are. But there's definitely different types of gangs. I'm not going to name them all, but there's different types of gangs, especially in Atlanta. There is a growing number of different kind of cliques and associations. And for that loyalty is as deep as family is. So for them, you know, we had a situation recently where one student was kind of jumped. And so other students who are associated with that student's gang then look for the kids who did that to retaliate because there's a loyalty there. So that's another thing culturally to break, you know, but if these kids are feeling like that's their family, and I will tell you, there are a lot of broken homes in urban areas. There's a lot of parents that are absentee parents. And like I said, could just be surviving. And your concern is paying bills, not so much the raising and the emotional, you know, support that your students need. But you have a lot of students who are out here paying bills themselves, raising themselves. And the gang serves as kind of another family and protection, right? So if you're the only one in your neighborhood who's not in the gang, you're a target. So, you know, it's a little more complicated than I think we're probably making it seem, but there's a lot of layers to what's happening. And, you know, to hear what parents feel like on their end. You know, I know they look to the school to help fix some things, but, you know, what's so much we can do.
Well, I thank you for enlightening me. You know, I guess I am removed. I only knew about the Crips and the Bloods in LA.
Oh, yeah. No, there's a lot more.
There's a lot more.
I wasn't naive to believe there were no gangs in Atlanta. I just don't know anything about them. And I certainly didn't realize the hold that they have on high school kids. And now that I'm hearing that, I'm sorry?
And middle school.
And middle school.
And a lot of it is driven by social media as well. And of course, a lot of the issues are the same issues that we had in high school, especially with the girls over boys, but it's just a lot more violent. And then they have weapons. They are bringing guns to school. And so that kind of intensifies the violence.
So that's a bigger issue to me. Like the guns, the knives, do they just not know how to fight? Or, I mean, I guess it's just, if I'm losing, I'm going to win under any circumstance. Like we can't just get beat anymore.
And why so violent? You know, we had fights when I was in high school.
Right.
It was more like wrestling. No one went to the hospital. Nobody was cut. But I understand now, like Dr. Aisha just mentioned, they're bringing guns and knives to school. They want to kill somebody, I assume, if you look at them the wrong way, or you post something on social media that says what, Dr. Jones? What is it about? What are they posting on social media that's making them respond like they do?
I had an instance, and it was I saw you looking at my boyfriend. It can be just, typical adolescent issues, but they don't know how to process it and handle it. They haven't been taught how to process it and handle it in a way that doesn't lead to me going to your house and dragging you out and stomping your head into the concrete, or me calling my boyfriend and he brings his gun and shoots up your house. Like we had that happen about a month ago.
Yeah, Melanie, I also hear about one of your students, or two, I believe, who were recently shot and killed off campus. One was at his home. Can you give us a little information about that and what you believe may have led to someone actually shooting them?
You know what? I don't even know really the details to either of those cases, whether they were targeted or not. Okay. But we're talking young kids, teenagers who both were basically in their neighborhood. One of them was leaving from a gym location and was murdered. And the other one was outside of in his driveway.
Yeah.
So, the prevalence of crime, of course, in the community, that's an issue. Like the kids are just vulnerable and they're victims, even if they have nothing to do with it. Even if they weren't on social media and they weren't antagonizing anybody, they can be victims just as much because the gun thing is out of control, in my opinion. I mean, they have access to guns. I feel like it's harder for me to go get a gun than it is for them. They have it. And a lot of times, I had a situation where a student in a previous school, he brought a gun to school, but he wasn't bringing it to target anyone. It's that when he left school and he had to walk down his neighborhood, which is Old National, Gabi Road, he felt like he needed some protection to do that. It wasn't to bring the gun. I'm going to bring the gun because I'm going to shoot up the school. It wasn't anything like that. It was for protection in their neighborhoods. So a lot of the neighborhood ends up coming into the school. And I think until the school goes into the neighborhoods and the communities and starts doing work there, that's where we're going to constantly have that fight.
So you say schools going into the neighborhoods and doing work there. What kind of work would be done? And who would be willing to do that? Because I'm going to tell you right now, if I was in the school, you're not going to get me going down somewhere where I have a gun. I don't really want to go somewhere where I need the gun for protection.
No, I know. You're right. And as a president, the only individuals who do that would be social workers. They make house visits, not for the purposes I'm necessarily talking about, but they're the only ones who really go back out into the community and leave the school. And not to put them on blast, to be the people to do that. Like I would certainly be willing. Anyone who I think has a mental health background should be the ones to do this kind of work. We have to bridge those things. And as part of school counseling, involvement of community is part of what we're supposed to do as well, right? That's part of our client base as well. And we don't really take the time, not that we have that much time, but take the time to do that, right? But that to me is a big piece. We have to bridge that. There has to be more work done in the surrounding areas that impact our schools than just saying we're going to be in this bubble because the bubble's shattered. They're coming in with it anyway. You know what I mean? So we're not protected in our little enclave of a school. It's not, that's a fantasy now. So we need to do more active type of work in our communities, to be honest.
Right. With the students and the parents.
I agree. So Dr. Jones, what have you seen? What's the impact of all of this, gang violence in the community spilling over into the school? Melanie just told us it's, the school is no longer a safe haven place. Some people bringing guns just to protect themselves, but what's been the impact on the climate of the school environment, even with those who have nothing to do with the violence, and even some of the teachers? How's it affecting the rest of the group?
Well, definitely teacher retention. There are a lot of teacher vacancies in a lot of high schools. And I don't even know if parents are aware of the number of teacher vacancies in some of the schools. Yeah. But also a lot of our students, and I will say this, they, are suffering from mental health issues, anxiety, depression, and they'll even articulate that to you. I'm not having a good day. I'm suffering with mental health. Self-harm is up. Suicidal ideation is up. Like I could say every week I have 1 or 2 students who are coming to my office, suicidal ideations or self-harm. So that has definitely increased. And unfortunately, in the schools, as schools counselors, we aren't equipped to deal with those mental health issues because we have so many other responsibilities, scheduling, getting you ready for college and things of that nature, that we don't have the time to devote to those mental health issues.
Wow. It sounds like you guys are working in a mental health urgent care unit. Is
without the help you need, without the
Right.
staff on hand. So let me ask Dr. Jones, I'll start with you. Since you can't provide those mental health services in the schools, what do you do to help these children during, I used to call it their most awake hours. It's their whole work day.
Well, in the school that Melania and I work, we do have, we partner with an agency who does have a mental health counselor who is there at least 3 days out of the week. But I mean, again, it's just one person. The school is 1,700 students. So she can't service, all of the students. We do provide resources, the counselors as well as the social workers provide resources for outside agencies who could provide mental health support for students when it's brought to our attention, because that's another issue. We don't always know unless the student, kind of comes to you or they have a absolute meltdown, in school, and then they're brought to you and then you got to have a conversation with them and you find out they are suffering from social anxiety, or they are suffering from depression, or they are having thoughts of self-harm or suicidal ideations.
Oh my. So Milani, like I mentioned, it sounds like you guys sometimes working with some intense issues and there are limited resources through the school system. How are you reaching some of your students and what are you doing to help them to at least cope a little bit better?
So for me, and I think it helps, and Dr. Jones could probably attest to this, having mental health background and being licensed professionals, having that background, because not all school counselors have that. That's first. We're a very small population, to be honest. I do groups. I love doing groups. I think that provides open, safe space for them to really express themselves and see that there's other peer support. You're not the only one going through this. You're not crazy. Nothing's really wrong with you. You're dealing with the same things everyone else is dealing with. And I meet weekly with my students because my students have particular barriers, which is preventing them from really graduating on time. And so I meet with them weekly to do that as well. And there's a lot of check-ins and there's a lot that they end up offloading and discussing about. And I will say that I think over the past 5 years, schools have done a better job of destigmatizing mental health for students, because we do get more students saying, I'm anxious. Something's not right. I don't feel good about myself, or I have suicide ideation. I think they're more comfortable coming to us about that, which I think is the right, a step in the right direction. I just think that they have to change our roles as school counselors if they want us to address that, or hire more school counselors to be able to help shoulder that load, because that's what we're there for. We're student support services, but we're just so limited because we're, especially in high school, there's so much pressure on students. Let that be the bottom line. That's what you're supposed to do. And so, we want to graduate healthy students, of course, mentally healthy, emotionally healthy, but it's difficult to do so in the climate that we're currently in.
So my next question is for these students who are violent, and my mind is possibly the same people over and over again, what type of punishments do they receive, them or their parents? Because I'm also like, if it's the same kid, should the mom go to jail?
Now that's tricky, right? I feel so many, you know what I mean? I have to that's a hard one. So yes, there are policies in place. If a student is violent, they get sent to a separate school that's more like a military type environment, very small, and they get more intentional kind of behavior supports. right? And then they're allowed to come back to their homeschool because that's more like a program to get you kind of adjusted, right? And then they come back to the homeschools. And a lot of times we see, as we have, because we had a lot returned to us in January, the uptick of violence again, because you have to see the kids back in the same situation. They didn't quite get what they needed, right? Can you hold parents responsible for that? That's hard because, like I said, I feel like if parents knew better and had the skills, they would do better. So in a lot of ways, I don't feel like our parents have it and know it. So do you penalize them for not knowing? Do you penalize them for not, maybe if they're not using resources? So say we provided resources for the student and they didn't take up on it, because a lot of times, like Ratana said, you can give them a resource and say, hey, your kid needs some outside mental health. They're like, no, they're good. Yeah, now that in that sense, now you're being neglectful. Now you're not putting the child as a priority. But I don't know about penalizing parents. I know that that's a case. I think like in New York with truancy, like you can send a parent to jail if the student doesn't go to school. I remember that was like something that was passed at one point.
Yeah, that's in Alabama too. If your child isn't going to school and they're not of the age where they could drop out, the parent can go to jail.
Yeah.
I'm all for that. So I'm hearing, Dr. Jones, that a lot of these issues with the students in particular are stemming from the parents, or maybe a home environment. That may be a better term to use. What type of resources are there for the parents? I know you guys are there for the students within the school system, but it's sounding like a lot of it is coming from the home environment. And then Melanie, I'll ask you, what can the parents do? We go to you next. But Dr. Jones?
Well, that is a good question. We do, in our particular school, we do have a parent liaison, who offers workshops and seminars. But I mean, the issue is parent participation. Right before this meeting, we had a virtual meeting. There were 9 parents that showed up. So I don't know how you get past that barrier, other than because the expectation that they're going to come to us, that's not happening. So I think we have to be more intentional in going to them.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're offering something. I didn't know that. They didn't have that when I was in high school, anything from my parents at all. But you guys are providing at least some type of training or workshops beyond going to college, more personal things.
Right.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that, and before we end tonight's show, if you can just tell the parents where they can go to find those resources, that'd be great. So Melanie, what can the parents do to help curb some of these issues so it doesn't affect other people, including the kids and teachers who want to learn and want to teach?
Assuming it's a parent who cares and wants to help.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm forever like the optimist. I believe all parents want to like really care, right? All parents really do care. They may have some barriers to that. They may have some trauma themselves. They may have not learned how to parent because they didn't have parents themselves. So I'm always one to try to believe that everyone can do, what it is in the best interest of a student. Dr. Jones and I both did a grief counseling after we had multiple deaths occur in our school community. And we did a grief counseling workshop. And we posted on the website, and we, gave that, and had many resources for parents to how do you parent through grieving, like your own grief as a parent, but also dealing with a student who's grieving. And I think that, like Fontella just said, like we have to go and we have to take it to them now because, and I don't know if this is more post-pandemic. I've seen a lot of less participation from parents. I think post-pandemic, because maybe there's still that kind of fear of coming back into the building, or people just got used to doing things. But a lot of everything we offer is virtually. So you can't really
make it easy for people to attend.
Yeah. But I think the first steps for parents are things like this. So podcasts where you have therapists talking about ways in which you can assist your child, looking on different Facebook groups, looking for support, looking for means to help your child, reaching out to us. We are here. We are very much willing to help and assist. I can't say that there's any school counselors who wouldn't do that. And then really just sitting down and listening to their child. Right. A lot of times they are telling you what they need. They are crying out for some type of help, attention. They need something. You need to listen to them.
Maybe they need a whooping.
And I also think what I find a lot of times is some of the parents are open to counseling for their child. But what I like to say is it needs to be the family. because the issue is not just necessarily the child. Like you as the parent need to also participate in the counseling process as well. So I think that would help, because a lot of times they just want to send their kid to therapy and there's nothing wrong with me, it's all the kid, and that's not the case. So more family counseling, I think, would also benefit.
Yes.
I see. So I'm going to ask you guys a political question. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. You know, there is a movement with one of the political groups about handing out vouchers to parents to send their kids to other schools, particularly private schools, and using some of the tax-based property tax funds to pay for it. There's a large, huge movement for, and there's an opposing side who is saying no. What do you guys think about some of these parents who cannot afford to live in another neighborhood? They're entrenched in the community, and giving them options to send their kids to other schools, particularly private schools. Any thoughts about that? You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but you know, we're all grown folks and we're in a political time, but you guys brought up some issues that I think a lot of Black folks don't think about. But what are your thoughts about that?
No, I have a lot of opinions about this. I actually do. As an educator, I'll say first and foremost, the idea that you're going to give a small population of students in a certain community the opportunity to have the education they deserve is a problem. That's problematic. I prefer that they pour money into those school systems to make all the schools in any area the best they can be, as opposed to these options out. Because yes, you can give some vouchers and you cherry pick the brightest and best out of the community and you send them over here to this school and perform over here. What about the rest of the kids? Yeah. Right. So I don't feel like that's a solution for the entire system. I think that's a good solution. That's a temporary quick fix for a parent who says, my kid can do better than what you're providing them here. Please let me allow them to send them somewhere else. Absolutely. That's very individualistic though, right? That's not a systems approach to fixing something that's clearly broken. Where I come from, when you're in high school, you can apply to go to any high school in any borough. There's no, you live in this neighborhood, so you have to go to this school, which I see here. I haven't lived anywhere else really, but here and New York. And here it's, your property tax is going to dictate how much money is poured into your school.
And where you go to school.
And where you go to school. And that to me is a very, I don't want to call it like a slavery kind of policy, but you're keeping people entrenched in poverty because you're not allowing them access to a better quality education. Right. And so that's the only issue I have with the voucher thing is, let's not make that in the charter school system, our saving grace, because you're leaving behind way too many, 1,700 students to be exact for us in our school that may not be able to have that opportunity. So districts need to pour money into all schools. If you're not going to allow them to go to different schools, right? If it's against the law, and we have parents who've gotten arrested for things like this, right?
Yep. This is right.
Because I want my kid to go to this better school over here across town where they're not shooting and fighting every day. And you don't allow that. That's a law to keep you in this little box. That's the problem for me. Like I said, I have a lot of opinions about that.
I thank you. You enlightened me. Any thoughts on that, Dr. Jones?
Well, I agree with Melanie. I believe in pouring into the school in your community, because the school where Melanie and I work, we have some excellent students who are thriving, going to Georgia Tech and Emory. So I think if we pour the resources into, yes, we do. If we pour the resources into our school and support our schools, they can be great schools as well. Absolutely. So I definitely believe in pouring into the school in your community.
Absolutely.
It just sounds like those great students may sometimes need to be protected from the not so great. I'm sorry, I won't say not so great. The students who need a little more support. So if they were to pour more money into the schools, what are some of the things that you think they would need to use that money for? That would make the schools better? Counselors. Okay.
Okay.
More caseloads. Right. We're the ones to deal with the students who need the adjustments, right? We're we're really that first line defense. Like, we need to be there in that position. They need to hire more teachers so you don't have 35 kids in a classroom. Hard to manage 35 teenagers. Right.
How could you get more teachers in there, though? Aren't they leaving? Is it that they need more money?
That would help overall, I think, education-wise. Teachers, I think teachers are looking at it as, I can go work somewhere else for less stress. A lot of times the teachers you'll find in the schools that we serve really do it out of like the goodness of their heart. Like this is a population that they're dear to. They really want to work here.
I've met those teachers.
Why they do it. Yeah. And that's their motivation.
Yeah.
But yes, more money. I mean, some areas, I think in Chicago, you get like a little stipend if you work in a high risk area.
Mhm.
Well, our county doesn't have that. Like perhaps you should employ that, teacher retention. I mean, it's sad to say money rules a lot of things, but it does. It does in this country. So yeah, pour more money in. And let's see where it goes.
And so that we can expose our students to things outside of their neighborhood. A lot of times, we may go to the higher ups and we don't have the money for that. And our parents can't, they don't have the money to kind of offset the cost. So it's just money would definitely make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So guys, what type of tips or suggestions would you have for the students in these schools where fighting and violence and gangs appear to be the norm? If you don't participate, you're entertained by it. And I can only imagine the impact of that once these kids grow up to be adults. But what type of suggestions or tips do you have for the students to fight some of this internally with themselves or within their community? Let's start with you, Dr. Jones.
Well, I definitely would encourage to see something, say something, because to be quite honest, a lot of incidents that could have really blown up into something major have been mitigated because a student saw something and they reported it to a teacher, a resource officer, an administrator, or a counselor. So I definitely think that's something that we need to encourage our students to do more and to kind of get out of this, what is it, snitches get stitches mentality. Yeah. But just to, when you see something, report it. And a lot of our students, they do that. And that's definitely kind of prevented some things from escalating to an extremely volatile level, at least at our school.
Gotcha. Milani?
We have this thing called Restorative Circle that has started. It's not unique to our school, but there's a lot of posters and flyers for students to do just what she's talking about. If you have a conflict with someone, let's get into a circle and have this conversation about it before it gets to a violent piece. And I think that's something that we can tell students to definitely do. Don't think that you can't come to an adult and have some assistance with some of the issues you're dealing with. Like, rely on us. That's what we're here for. Use us as best you can to help you with everything that's going on in the school.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So my next question is, considering that you all are working in this area with so much violence, I imagine there's a lot of stress and is dangerous. What do you do to protect yourself? We can start with you, Milani. And self-defense. What about you? Let's start with you, Milani.
So, it's so funny. I think once you've been in education over like 5 years in environments like this, not to really jump into fights, to allow your resource officers to do the things that they need to do. And mistakenly this year, there was a situation where one of our administrators was, a young lady was kind of in the midst of something. And I felt compelled to assist in that situation because there wasn't anyone around. And, once police gets there and they're trying to break things up and they pepper spray and they don't make announcements about they're going to pepper spray. And so I, my hands, luckily not my face, but, my hands got pepper spray and everything. It's really hard because, you want to help, but it's really not in our best physical and mental ability to jump into things like that. There are people at our schools who are there to do those things. And so but it is difficult because it's hard to see, another adult fight and you want to help and assist your fellow coworker. You do, you know what I mean? Because that can lessen the injury to them as well.
If you like them, if it's somebody you like.
Yeah, I guess so. But I think self-care wise for me, and this has been years in the making, I don't bring work home. I don't do work in the space of my home. My home is a sacred space. I don't do anything unless they're I do have a work cell. So unless there's something that has happened that I know students may need to reach out to me, my phone goes in my closet, in my bag, and I don't touch it until I get back in the morning. And that's just creating those boundaries so that I can have some peace and some just an emotional break, to be honest, to just kind of either process, but just to not deal with the things that are occurring at the school, because it is stressful. It is a heightened situation, especially with school shootings. And when we have lockdowns announced over the, it's difficult because you have to admit you are getting heightened sense like, oh, something's going on. And it's like, okay, everything's okay. Oh no, something else. Oh, now there's a fight. You know what I mean? Like it's constant, up and down. And like you said, students that come to your office with major issues, it's a lot. It's a lot. And if you don't really take the time to either put some boundaries in place or have some real specific like self-care regimens implemented and followed, we should know better because we know better, right? Like we're all licensed, we know better, but it's a matter of really implementing those and making sure you do them. And I would encourage parents to do the same, to be honest. And I talk to my students about self-care all the time. What do you do to help alleviate the stress? How do you deal with grief? How do you deal with stress? Like those are conversations you have to have because there may not be anybody at home telling them how to healthy cope with things,
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. What about you, Dr. Jones?
Well, for me, boundaries as well is very important. At 3:45, I leave and I'm done. There was a time when I would have my email on my phone and I would be checking. None of that. So when I'm off. And that's definitely helped me from a mental perspective to not, carry the work home with me. So I would say for me, that definitely has been the biggest thing as far as my self-care is concerned.
So you check out. I don't blame you as I'm listening to you to describe something that sounds like a war zone sometimes and going to battle when all you're trying to do is help people to graduate and be productive citizens in our society and, go on to college or VOTEC school or something like that. So that is, I commend you guys for doing what you do and giving the suggestions that you guys gave. I'm hoping some of the politicians heard you, particularly in your county, people who can make some decisions. So we're at the end of today's show now, and you guys have really enlightened me and educated me about some things. But I'm going to give you two an opportunity to give us what's your final word, final thought, that you want to share with the audience about what's going on with some of our primarily Black high schools that are out there. I want to start with you, Dr. Jones.
I would definitely encourage parents to get more involved, not just in their students' lives, but in the school. Find out what's going on, in the school. Get involved. A lot of parents are so unaware of just even, when grades go home. Like I've had students, they've gotten to their senior year and the parent says, oh, I didn't know he was failing. So it's important to get involved with the opportunities that the school has for you to assist your students, not just academically, but from a social, emotional perspective as well.
Thank you.
Milani?
Yeah, I would definitely piggyback off that. We are a resource. We are here for you. Our job is to support not only your child, but you as well. So use us, contact us, speak to us if you are dealing with anything. And I think sometimes they think we're only concerned with the academic piece. We're concerned with all things that might affect them academically also. So whatever may be going on in your home, whatever you might be dealing with or struggling with, please feel free to reach out to your school counselor. And we are here to help in any way that we can. I think that there's a big mental health kind of crisis with our country. Like I said, we've dealt with a lot in these last couple of years, and everyone's kind of just like, keep it moving. We're still in this kind of survival mode thing. And that breaks down over time. And so we all kind of can tap into and can use the support of a clinical mental health therapist or just anyone who can help alleviate that. That's a life coach to you. If that's your spiritual leader, whatever it is you need to lead on, it's fine, but don't ignore the fact that you're struggling with something, because truth be told, most of us are struggling with something and we can all use some help.
Thank you. I endorse your ideas about more mental health professionals who are trained and licensed working in schools. Mm-hmm. And hopefully we can have some type of requirement where at least one or two right. school counselors in the school can be licensed, or hire someone specifically to do the mental health counseling. I understand you guys contract out. The school system contracts out to provide the mental health services, and they seem overwhelmed by some of the things. So Dr. Jones, what was that resource? How can parents find out what type of resources are available to them? Where can they find that?
So I would suggest, So it's probably different for each school, but each school does have a PTA. So that will be one avenue. And then most schools have what's called a parent liaison. And so that would also be a point of contact for parents. And also parents, check out your school's website. There's a lot of useful information on the website, especially in the student support or counseling services tab.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Dr. Aisha, your words, your final thoughts.
I just want to say I appreciate what you all do and anyone else who works in the school system. My dad was a school counselor and later on a principal. I remember him getting cut by a razor blade, breaking up a fight. But I also remember that he didn't have as many issues as you all do today because I remember him paddling children who cut up in school. I know you can't do that anymore. So bless you all for doing what you do without having the resources and the ability and rights to do what some educators and counselors could do back in the day.
Absolutely. I endorse that completely. So guys, thank you for joining us today. Stay on afterwards. But I want to thank the audience for joining us today. I hope you learned a lot from our expert guests. That is Dr. Fontella Jones and Milani Smith. You guys have been watching Two Therapists and a Microphone. We will see you guys next week, Monday at 7:00 p.m. on the Our Black Media Network. See you then.
I like that.